Hey everybody, it's Brian from the Blue Ridge Soapbox Derby. Today I want to show you how to assemble one of our kits. It's actually pretty easy. You'll just need a few basic tools and about an hour and a half of your time. So to get started, we need to make sure that we've got everything that we need. So you're going to need a drill, some drill bits, assorted bits to drive the various screws in, square, rubber mallet. If you don't have a rubber mallet, you can use a hammer. You're just going to have a little block here that you can hammer against so you don't damage the kit. Socket set, again, if you don't have a socket set, you can use some crescent wrenches. There's also a few additional items, if you have, will come in really handy. A pneumatic stapler, some clamps, and a second drill just to speed up the process. So let's get everything unpacked and see what we got. So in the kit, you're going to find everything that you need to build your car. We've got the steering system, we've got all the side pieces, the axles, the brake system, even all the nuts and bolts are ready to go. Let's open them up and have a look. So we're going to start by putting together the steering assembly. In your kit, you're going to find this piece here. It's already got two hooks installed on it, so we don't have to worry about that. All we have to do is apply the two dowels to the corresponding holes, and it'll be ready to go. One other thing that we do need is a good quality wood glue. Make sure not to skip this. The entire car needs to be glued together as well as using the supplied screws that come with the kit. So to get started, simply going to apply some glue to either side. It really doesn't matter. It's a snug fit, and if you need to, you can use your rubber mallet. And do the same thing to the other side. And again, tap it down. So at that point, you want to use your supplied screws, and you'll notice that there's already two pre-drilled holes. Simply put them in and tighten them down. Okay. Wipe off any excess glue and set it aside to dry. Okay, now let's move on to the brake assembly. In your kit, you're going to find this piece which is labeled brake arm. All the pieces you can see are clearly labeled as to what they are and to where they go. We're also going to need these two curved pieces, which are labeled brake shoe. These two have holes for dowels, which we'll get to in a second. Also, you're going to see two pieces that are labeled brake block. They also say the word front on them with an arrow, which again we'll see here in just a moment. We're also going to need the two dowels, which are in the kit, and the 3/8 bolt, which has the washers and this locking nut already applied to it. So if we look at our brake shoe and our brake arm, we can see that these pieces can only fit in one direction. So once we've established which side it goes on, we're ready to apply some glue in our dowels. Once we have the dowels in, apply glue to the brake shoes. These dowels are going to stick out the other side, so we have to flip it over. And you want to tap it all the way down until it bottoms out. Apply more glue. And use our other half and match it up. Once everything is fully seated and matching up, you're ready to either clamp it, or in my case, I'm going to use a pneumatic stapler just to speed up the process. We're now ready to move on and apply the tire to the brake arm. The brake arm has a curved portion. This is what's going to face the front of the car. And if we flatten out the tire, we can see that there's a notch taken out of the top of it. This also faces the front of the car. So what you want to do is simply wrap it around, flush up the front of it with the curved part, take one of the black screws, these are a number 8, and we want to put one right in the middle just to hold it temporarily. We now want to take another screw, and right under the top part of the tire there's a little lip here, and you want to apply all 3 screws on each side under that lip. And it helps to angle them up just a little bit so that it pulls the tire even tighter. to apply the final two pieces to our brake component. And that's our brake block assembly. And again, these have front with an arrow rode on them, which matches the curved part of our brake arm assembly, which also faces front. So we want to take our bolt with a washer and apply it through, add another washer, and we want to go through our brake arm, add the other washer, and again match up the front with this front, add another washer, and then add our locking nut. Now at this stage it's not critical to tighten it down, you just want to keep it together for further assembly. So we can set this part aside and move on to the next part. Alright, so it's time to move on to the next step. What I have here in front of me is the bottom half of the car. And what you'll notice is there's a series of notches all the way around taken out of this bottom piece. You'll also see that they're labeled from B1 to B8, and that's going to match up with the side pieces here in the next step. But what we have to do first is pre-drill for the holes where the screws are going to go. And if you look next to each notch, you're going to see a series of divots right there, and that's going to tell us where to pre-drill our holes. I'm using a 3/32 inch drill bit. These are available in pretty much any drill bit kit that you have. If not, you can easily pick one of these up at any hardware store. What we want to do is pre-drill the hole as vertical as possible. You don't want to get it crooked. You also don't want to slant it back and forth. So try and be extra careful and drill the holes straight down. So after pre-drilling all the holes on the bottom panel, I went ahead and did the same thing to the top front as well as the top rear panel. And if you look back at the bottom panel, you're going to see this slot cut out of it. And that's for the brake arm assembly in a few minutes. You're going to see that there's also 5 divots here, which we need to pre-drill as well. It's time to move on to the side pieces. There's 6 of them. And they all have the letter T and a number as well as the letter B and a number. And that simply stands for top and bottom. The numbers correspond with numbers in the bottom and the top panels, and these also need to be pre-drilled just like we did there. It's got the same divots, and we're going to use the same drill bit. Now we're ready to apply our sides to our bottom. And all we have to do is simply match up the number with the corresponding number on the bottom panel. We're going to use glue in this step and go on all the surfaces that are going to be touching. Drop it into the slot, and you may need the rubber mallet to tap it on in there. You want to take the square and make sure that the piece is vertical. Use the drill with the same drill bit, go through the holes that you just pre-drilled into the sides and drill on into the bottom piece. Then use the supplied screws and tighten it down. got all the sides on, I went ahead and added the top 2 panels in the same way. And again, all you have to do is match up the corresponding numbers, and they can only go on one way. Now what we want to do is look at the other set of holes, and these were the set of holes that we pre-drilled at the very beginning. And we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to pre-drill, and we're going to add screws just like we did from the side. We just want to work our way all the way around the car, flip it over, and do the same thing on the bottom. Now that I've got all the screws in the bottom half, we're ready to apply the axle. And we're going to start with the rear one. Now the rear axle is going to have 4 holes that are drilled all the way through it. And they're going to match up with the 4 holes that are also in the rear half of the bottom panel. So you just want to simply lay it on top. And we're going to use the 4 2.5-inch bolts, as well as the washers, lock washers, and nuts. So we simply want to feed them up from the bottom and line them up with the axle. Add a washer, a locking washer, and then the nut. And you just want to finger tighten it for now, because we want to go ahead and get all the other ones in there. It makes it easier to line them up. Now that we've got all the bolts on, we're going to need to go ahead and tighten them down. So we're going to use a ratchet and a wrench and just snug them up. Now let's move on to the front axle. The front axle has 4 small holes drilled in the middle, and that's where we're going to mount our Lazy Susan. Now if you look at it, there's 2 flanges, and the holes are actually a little bit different from side to side. So make sure you match up the side that goes with the axle into the pre-drilled holes. Now take your axle, which has a Lazy Susan applied to it, and you're going to center it over the 4 holes that have already been pre-drilled into the bottom panel. Now you notice that the front axle has 2 hooks applied to it, and these hooks need to face the rear of the car. You're going to take 4 screws, these are the number 6, which are the silver ones, and going through the Lazy Susan, secure it down to the car. So now the car's still upside down, we're ready to add our brake assembly. So I used the holes that we pre-drilled in the first step, and centering the whole assembly over the rectangular slot, I pre-drilled up through them and into these support blocks. Now if I went ahead and added the screws to the holes, we're going to add some glue to the assembly and secure it down. And remember, the support blocks are labeled front for the front of the car, and this longer part of the brake faces the back. Now with the car still upside down, we're ready to add our final piece to the bottom, and that's this steering stop block assembly. Kind of a triangular shaped piece that's got 2 slots in it. These are going to correspond with the 2 pre-drilled holes that are already in the bottom. Now we want to take the narrower end and face it towards the front. Take 2 1/4-inch by 2-inch bolts with a washer on the bottom. We want to come up from the inside, add our other washer, lock washer, and nut, and do that on the other one as well. Now what this is going to do is limit the travel that it can steer. We don't want the wheels contacting the side of the body. So right now we want to just get it where there's about a 1/2 inch of clearance between the wheel and the body. Now remember, we're going to add sides to this, which are going to take up a little bit of extra room as well. We can always adjust this later if we need to. Now that the car is back upright, I've got it put up on a couple of blocks just to keep the brake from scrubbing our work surface. I went ahead and installed the spring as well as the 2 screws which go into the pre-drilled holes of each component. We're now ready to apply the steering wheel to the car. The steering assembly has 2 hooks which are going to correspond to the 2 hooks on the axle, so these need to face forward. We're going to take our 5/8 bolt with the washer, come from the top down, and add the steering assembly. Add a washer and our locking nut and secure it down. You want to tighten it so that it's as close to the top as you can get without it scrubbing. I'm going to use a couple of crescent wrenches for that. Now we're ready to add our side panel to the car. But before we do that, we have to add our cable system which controls the steering. If you look at it, you're going to see that there's a turnbuckle that's offset to one side. This is the part that goes forward on the car. The other side is what connects to our steering mechanism in the car. We're going to go ahead and attach that first. It simply clips on. Take our side, and I'm going to temporarily clamp mine just to keep it out of the way. You want to reach in, grab the other half of the cable, and connect it to the axle. Do the exact same thing on the other side. Now that both cables have been secured to the axle as well as the steering wheel, we can screw on our side panels. Don't worry that the cables are loose at this point. That's the way we need them so that we can align them here in a little bit. As with all the other pieces, you'll see little divots in the side panels which indicate where to drill it. So I'm going to use a slightly smaller drill bit than before. This is a 1/16 inch drill bit. Pre-drill the panels and go behind with the screws that are supplied and secure it down. Here I've got the rear panel piece. I've went ahead and pre-drilled the holes for the middle, and that's going to correspond with our curved rear support. This also has the center hole already drilled in it, and so it's going to make mounting it much easier. I'm going to start by adding the center screw until it's just sticking out the other side. Align it with the hole in the brace and secure it down. Once that's done, we can add our top and bottom screw to finish it off. Now that we're on the back side of the car, we're ready to add our rear panel. To do that, you want to put it in at a bit of an angle and then turn it until it locks into place. Make sure the top is flush and add some screws. You want to go around adding screws everywhere there's a divot indicating that's where a screw goes. And don't forget the sides. Okay, so now we want to align the axle with the steering wheel. In order to do that, we've got 2 blocks. One of them is labeled axle alignment block, the other one is steering wheel alignment block. So it's very simple. Take your block, push it tightly against the axle, and when the front of the block is even with the front of the car, you want to clamp it down. Now we know that the axle is perpendicular to the center line of the car. Do the same thing with the steering block up front, and we know that that is also in line. If you don't have clamps, you can always just add a few temporary screws and take them out afterwards. Now that we know that we have our axle and our steering wheel in parallel and also lined up with the center of the car, we want to tension our steering cables. Simply turn the turnbuckles to tighten up the cable. Do this on both sides until they have the same amount of tension and they're tight but not overly tight. After tensioning both the steering cables and removing our setup blocks, we're ready to add our final panel. And as before, Had screws everywhere you see an indentation. All right, so that's it. Not too bad. Hopefully you're able to put your car together without any problems. If you do have any questions or comments, so please feel free to reach out to us through our Facebook page at the Blue Ridge Soapbox Derby. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you guys on race day.